Well, good morning, and I'd like to call this hearing to order. I'd like to thank all of our witnesses for taking time out of your busy schedules to be able to join us today and to discuss the Small Business Act and how it currently applies to small agricultural enterprises. As members know, the Small Business Act authorizes the Small Business Administration to develop small business size standards to specific industries. The SBA currently has size standards for over 1,000 different industries and size standards ranging from $4.5 million to $35.5 million in annual receipts, or 50 to 1,500 employees. The SBA sets the size standards only after studying a number of statistical factors and industry-specific considerations, including technological changes and industry growth trends. The law also now requires the SBA to revisit each industry's size standard at least once every 5 years, and to ensure public participation in the process through notice and comment rulemaking. However, we treat small agricultural enterprises differently. Congress statutorily sets a size standard. It wasn't always this way. Until 1985, the SBA set the size standards for these 46 industries. In 1984, the SBA set the size standard for these industries at $100,000, a level that Congress believed would harm family farms because it was too low. Therefore, in 1985, Congress amended the Small Business Act to create a $500,000 size standard for small agricultural enterprises. This size standard was updated in the year 2000 when it was set at $750,000 in annual receipts. The $750,000 standard is currently the lowest revenue-based standard for any industry, and it simply has not kept pace with inflation or changes in the farming sector of the economy. If the size standard is too low, it limits agricultural producers' access to billions in federal prime contracts and subcontracts. By lumping all small agricultural enterprises into one size standard, we also aren't accurately capturing the distinctions between the various industries. Furthermore, the Department of Agriculture typically relies on the $750,000 size standard when assessing the effects on the proposed rules pursuant to the Regulatory Flexibility Act. An artificially low standard could lead to additional regulatory burdens for small agricultural enterprises. Thus, a provision that originally helped small businesses may now actually be harming them. The purpose of today's hearing is to examine whether the current statutory size standard continues to meet the needs of small agricultural businesses, and if not, what alternatives Congress should pursue to ensure equitable treatment for small businesses and their concerns in this industry. You know, Andrew Jackson once said that the American farmer is the bone and sinew of our economy. So we need to make sure that the policies that we create help rather than hinder our small farmers. Before I introduce the witnesses for our next panel, I would like to yield to Ranking Member Murphy for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. This committee has long recognized the vital role small businesses play in our national economy. Small firms remain a cornerstone of economic growth and make up the vast majority of employer firms and creating 2/3 of all new net jobs. Given the many economic benefits of a strong small business sector, Congress and the Federal Government have established a range of programs helping small companies flourish and hire new workers. How a small business is defined can vary widely by industry. For some sectors, a measurement of number of employees makes sense. For others, annual revenues are a better benchmark. Regardless of which metric is used, what qualifies as a small business under federal law can have major consequences. For example, small businesses qualify for billions of dollars in government-guaranteed loans every year, and being deemed a small business can give a firm pursuing federal contracts a boost in the procurement process. Everything from regulations to tax write-offs are impacted by whether a firm is classified as a small business or not. In that regard, how this committee, Congress, and the SBA define a small business very directly shapes our nation's small business policy. The size standards SBA uses determine which businesses are eligible for assistance and which firms have grown so large as to no longer warrant assistance under Small Business Act. With regards to small firms in agriculture production, SBA has encountered significant difficulty setting a practical standard. In the 1980s, Congress took some responsibility for setting the agriculture size standard. Since then, the threshold has only been adjusted since 2012. It's only one since 2012. Given changes in the major differences within this sector, it's important that this committee and Congress evaluate whether it's time to update this standard so as to better reflect the modern landscape of American agriculture. Since Congress began setting the small business size standard for agriculture, the midpoint for crops has grown 88%, from 589 acres to 1,105. As of 2011, farms with at least 2,000 acres now account for more than 34% of cropland. Additionally, with the advent of new technologies, many agricultural businesses have vastly increased their production rates. Despite these changes, there has also been a reduction in the number of small and mid-sized farms. According to the Department of Agriculture, the number of farms with at least $1 million in sales more than doubled between 1982 and 2007. Small commercial farms, those with $10,000 to $250,000 in sales, fell by two-thirds. Although SBA has issued proposed size standard changes for a number of industries, agriculture has been left out of that process as Congress took on this responsibility in the 1980s. Today, we will examine how current size standards function in the real world. We will hear from those in the relevant industries as to how the standard is working for them and whether it is in need of a change. Additionally, we will hear from SBA as to their current methodology, how it could be applied to set new size standards for those operating in these industries. It is my hope that we can come to the best solution as to how to review the size standard for those in agricultural production. This is an important task with resources already stretched thin. It is important that small business assistance truly reaches agriculture producers, thereby maximizing economic growth and job creation. I want to thank all the witnesses for traveling here today. Your participation and insights will help this committee as we consider this timely topic. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. And if committee members have an opening statement prepared, I'd ask that they submit it for the record. I'd like to take a moment to be able to explain our timing lights for you. You will each have 5 minutes to be able to deliver your testimony. The light will start out as green, and when you have 1 minute remaining, the light will turn yellow. And finally, at the end of your 5 minutes, it will turn red. And we'd ask that you adhere to the time limit. And we'll now begin with our testimony. I'd like to be able to introduce our first witness, Mr. John Shiraka, Associate Administrator for Government Contracting and Business Development at the United States Small Business Administration. Prior to his service at the SBA, he served as Vice President of the Aries Group at Silver Spring, Maryland. Mr. Shiraka, welcome back, and we look forward to your testimony.
Thank you for having me. Chairman Tipton, Ranking Member Murphy, and members of the subcommittee, I am honored to be here today to discuss SBA size standards methodology as it pertains to agricultural enterprises. As you know, with the exception of certain agricultural enterprises, the Small Business Act provides the U.S. Small Business Administration with statutory authority to establish small business size definitions referred to as size standards for Federal government programs. The size standards for agricultural enterprises, as was mentioned earlier, are unique in that they are directly established by statute. The size standard for agricultural enterprises was first set by statute in 1985. Currently, the size standard for 46 industries in the North American Industry Classification System, Sector 11, which includes agricultural, forestry, fishing, and hunting, is set by statute at $750,000 in annual receipts. SBA is capable of conducting the analysis to establish size standards for small businesses for agricultural enterprises, as SBA would use the same process that it currently uses to establish size standards for business concerns in other industries. When establishing size standards, SBA examines economic characteristics such as average firm size, industry concentration, startup costs and entry barriers, and Federal market conditions in each industry. At SBA, we believe in a transparent process. A detailed explanation of how we establish size standards is provided in our size standard methodology white paper, which is available on the agency's website. Establishing size standards based on characteristics of individual industries is consistent with Section 3A3 of the Small Business Act, which requires the administrator to ensure that size standards vary to the extent possible to reflect the differing characteristics of individual industries. SBA believes its methodology for establishing size standards meets this requirement by incorporating economic characteristics and Federal market conditions into its analysis of an industry-by-industry calculation. The Small Business Jobs Act of 2010 requires SBA to review all size standards and make necessary adjustments to reflect market conditions every 5 years. The Small Business Act does not require SBA to review size standards for most agricultural industries, so the agency did not review agricultural size standards under the current review. In addition, SBA reviews all monetary-based size standards every 5 years for inflation and makes necessary adjustments. Currently, SBA does not adjust the statutory agricultural size standard for inflation. As a result, again, the agricultural size standard has remained at the $750,000 receipt since 2000, while SBA has reviewed and adjusted monetary-based size standards for inflation 4 times in that same time period. If SBA were mandated to review agricultural size standards, adjustments for inflation and other economic conditions could be made. Thank you for your continued leadership and support. I'm happy to be here today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shiraka. I'd now like to be able to introduce Mr. Ken Osterman, owner of Osterman Farms, located in Neckley, Colorado, which is a town in the recognized center of the universe, the 3rd Congressional District of Colorado. In addition to his farming operation, Mr. Osterman served a term as president of the Colorado Corn Administrative Committee. He's testifying today on behalf of the Colorado Corn Growers Association. Mr. Osterman, thank you for appearing today, and you may now deliver your testimony.
Good morning, and thank you. Chairman Tipton, Ranking Member Murphy, and all committee members. My name is Mark Osterman, and I'm a 4th-generation farmer and rancher from near Eckley in northeast Colorado. I farm 2,500 acres of irrigated ground, raising corn, wheat, and soybeans in a family partnership with my dad. Together, we also run about 400 steers in a grower-stocker operation. My wife, Destiny, and I are raising our children to hopefully be the 5th generation to operate our farming operation. In addition to farming, I currently serve as the president of the Colorado Corn Administrative Committee, which is a state corn checkoff organization. When someone asks me today to sum up production agriculture, I like to say that farmers are just like everyone else, except that the cost of running our business adds a few extra zeros to the income and expense columns at the end of the month. From the combines that we use to harvest our crops, which cost as much, if not more, than many homes, to the enormous increases in the input costs associated with producing that crop, such as fertilizer, seed, and energy costs, the challenges of staying in the farming business can be difficult to manage. I believe part of the reason for increased costs can be attributed to an unprecedented period of growth in the agriculture industry. Many things have contributed to this period, such as an ever-increasing population demand for more protein and more grain, along with improved markets for ethanol. These factors and others have led to record demand for most production agricultural commodities, and in turn to higher prices for these commodities as well. With these higher prices, both for the commodities we grow and the inputs we must purchase, there's been a trend of consolidation in modern agriculture resulting in larger farms. These additional acres help us to spread our machinery costs and land payments over more acres and use our equipment more efficiently. With the average age of the American farmer continuing to rise, we will continue to see more and more farms being sold or rented out. Increased yields are another trend we are seeing in agriculture today. Thanks to advanced technologies, I am able to select hybrid seeds. I can effectively plant a field and know that because of seed selection, I've reduced the amount of inputs needed to combat weeds and insect attacks. Precision technology has helped me to maximize yields, minimize inputs, all while protecting the environment. Any single one of these variables I have talked about could support a need to increase the $750,000 level for production agriculture to beat this small business criteria. When you consider all of them together, it becomes abundantly clear that this level needs to be increased, and by a substantial amount. If you take my farm for an example, we usually raise roughly 1,500 acres of corn, 500 acres of soybeans, and 500 acres of wheat. In a typical year, we would hope to raise 300 bushels of corn, 25,000 bushels of soybeans, and 50,000 bushels of wheat. I did some research, and from 1985 to 2006, an average price for corn was approximately $2.27 per bushel. So our farm receipts just from our corn during that period would have been $681,000. Compare that to today's average price from 2007 to 2013, it's around $4.94 per bushel. The same 300,000 bushels would bring in around $1,482,000. So in summary, I believe that the Small Business Committee should consider substantially raising the arbitrary $750,000 in receipts that currently exist for agricultural producers. The dynamics of today's farms and farmers, especially those who farm as their sole source of income, have changed dramatically, and I believe the limit should as well. Due to factors largely out of a farmer's control, my total receipts can change dramatically from year to year, and I believe the SBA standard should take many of those factors into consideration and increase the standard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Osterman. I'd now like to be able to introduce Mr. Kiesman of Osborne, Missouri. Mr. Kiesman is owner of KK Red Angus Farms, where he raises breeder livestock. He is testifying today on behalf of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Mr. Kiesman, thank you for appearing here today, and pleasure to visit with you. And you may now deliver your testimony.
Well, thank you, sir. It's a pleasure of meeting you, sir, and talking about Colorado. Good morning, Chairman Tipton, Ranking Member Murphy, and members of the committee. I am Ken Kiesman, a cattle farmer from Osborne, Missouri. My family and I are members of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association and the Missouri Cattlemen's Association. It is a pleasure to testify before your committee today on how the livestock industry, and particularly our farming operation, KK Farms Red Angus, has evolved over the years. Our family started in the cattle business in the 1870s, and I began farming full-time in 1969 when I returned from active duty with the Missouri Air National Guard. KK Farms consist of 1,500 acres, of which 900 acres are owned by our family and remaining acres are leased. Of the 900 acres, 240 of the farm has been in our family since the establishment of our farm, earning us the Missouri Century Farm Award. Maintaining the original farm acres continues to be a priority of my family, and we have expanded our business model throughout the years to maintain our livelihood. Raising cattle is the foundation of our farm, and we've been in the registered Red Angus business since 1972. The face of the livestock industry is much different today than it was in 1969 when I returned to the farm. In 1969, there was approximately 845,000 beef cattle farms, with more than 34 million head of beef cattle. Other than the expansion of farms and herd size in 74 and 1995, there's been a steady decline of the number of farms and total number of head of beef cattle in the United States. Today, we have approximately 29 million head of beef cattle, and according to the 2012 Ag Census, there are 729,000 beef cattle farms. Even though we have the smallest beef herd since 1951, our industry has been able to utilize the latest science and management practices to produce approximately 25 billion pounds of beef. When you evaluate the success of Americans' cattle farmers and ranchers, we have developed a successful business model not only domestically but also globally. In terms of production, the United States has only 7% of the world's cattle supply, but we were able to produce 20% of the world's beef. We have found ways to utilize more of our natural resources and the latest science to be more efficient than our international competition. Our demand has changed like many other small farms since 1985. During the late 80s, due to changing trends in agriculture, we downsized our hog operation, increased our Red Angus herd. Our production costs have increased also, making it difficult for family farms to compete in today's environment. The cattle industry in Missouri is comprised of a lot of small family farms who make a big impact. We have a lot of small players who make a big impact nationwide. The average herd size in Missouri is 36 head, but overall we're the second largest beef cattle state behind Texas. We have to do everything we can to send signals to these families that the climate is right to expand. We use risk management by utilizing research technology afforded us through land-grant universities like the University of Missouri. Examples include planting cover crops over our corn and soybeans, which can be grazed by livestock. This helped manage our feed costs during the droughts of 2012 and 2013. In regards to risk management, we've added new ventures. In 2009, my son Craig and his wife added Windy Wine Company and planted nearly 8 acres of Missouri grapes. My son Cody and I ventured into the all-natural meat production sales of our Red Angus beef, and another son, Casey, and his wife started a microbrewery called Black Belt Brewery. Future plans are to help spread risk, are to include a farm-to-table restaurant, event center, and bed and breakfast. All of this adds value to our products and helps spread risk. It also assures that every family member and sons and their sons will have a place in our family farm. The evolution of today's livestock industry has shifted in order for family business to survive. We've expanded, diversified, and in the terms of agriculture, today's small businesses have changed. It is appropriate for the size standards to be changed by the Small Business Administration to most accurately represent today's small operations. It is my understanding that agriculture is the only industry where the statute establishes our size standard. With this being, Congress needs to change the statute and consider alternatives to these standards. Smaller operations play a significant role in the beef cattle industry. In closing, I appreciate the work that the committee has done, and there are opportunities for individuals to pursue the American dream. Small businesses are the lifeblood of America and rural communities. We also appreciate the good work the committee has done to bring small business perspective into the regulatory climate and is appreciated by smaller operations like KK Farms. Thank you for the opportunity today to share our family's history and commitment to agriculture. It's more than a business, it's our way of life.
Thank you, Ms. Kiesman, for your testimony, and we hope those samples are going to be passed out. We noticed that.
You are more than welcome to come take one. I think they're 1-ounce samples, so I think the Ethics Commission will be all right with that.
But we'll verify
I hope.
that. So, I'd now like to yield to Ranking Member Murphy so that he may introduce our final witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Robert Gunther, Senior Vice President of Public Policy for United Fresh Produce Association, which represents the fresh fruit and vegetable industry. During his time there, he has been interviewed and quoted by CNN, C-SPAN, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and other major publications. Formerly, Mr. Gunther served as congressional aide to the U.S. House Committee on Agriculture and has also worked as an environmental protection specialist for the Environmental Protection Agency's Office of Pesticide Programs. Welcome, Mr. Gunther.
Thank you, Ranking Member Murphy, Chairman Tipton. My name is Robert Gunther. I am the Senior Vice President of Public Policy for United Fresh Produce Association. As you know, United Fresh is the national trade association representing the entire distribution chain of fresh fruit and vegetable production, including growers, shippers, wholesale distributors, processors, and retailers. Since 1904, United Fresh has worked with Congress and the administration to help shape legislative and regulatory policies to provide a strong business climate for our members that encourages growth and development. We thank you for the opportunity to address an issue that impacts the ability of many of our United Fresh members to utilize key programs designed to assist small businesses as they seek to develop and diversify their operations. And on a personal note, I, like two of my other colleagues at the table today, also grew up on a small family farm which is located in north central Florida and is focused on citrus and nursery production for over 100 years. For a variety of reasons, such as changes in the economy or fluctuations in commodity prices, the number of agricultural producers operations classified as small businesses has been on a continual decline, even though many of these operations made no significant changes that would otherwise justify a reclassification. Taking into account current agricultural business models, a standard many times higher than the current $750,000 in annual receipts would be the norm in today's agricultural community. More importantly, fruit and vegetable producers, like producers of other commodities, will tell you that the annual gross receipts are not a reliable indicator of operation sizes, nor is it a good indicator of profitability in light of costs of inputs and labor, which in fruit and vegetable production are particularly significant. In addition to being unrealistic representation of many agriculture operations, the current SBA standard puts agriculture small business operators at a disadvantage in their ability to avail themselves of assistance they could utilize to grow and adapt their operations. Again, the current $750,000 size standard applied to agriculture operations limits small agriculture producers access to SBA assistance programs and federal contracting preferences for small, prime, and subcontractors. Key SBA programs that may prove useful to produce operations include loans to start, acquire, or expand a small business, or loans that provide long-term or fixed rate financing for assets such as land or building, among others. More importantly, when you look at the wide variety of programs available at the Department of Agriculture to help the fresh produce operations, including farm loan programs, market promotion and export assistance, technical assistance for conservation compliance, nutrition programs, rural and infrastructure development, new and beginning farmer programs, we believe it is important to ensure that there is a level of consistency between USDA and other federal agencies when it comes to a small business definition. Finally, among the most significant challenges that agriculture operations likely face, like any business, is compliance with government regulations. Some agencies use SBA size standards to assess their impact of their proposed regulations in accordance with the Regulatory Flexibility Act. However, the current standard for agriculture operations to qualify as a small business of annual receipts of no more than $750,000 was set by Congress in 2000, as was mentioned earlier. As discussed, given the enormous changes in agriculture since that time, a review of the small business standard, which would provide agriculture producers with a justifiable regulatory relief, is long overdue. To this end, we would suggest that Congress and the Administration consider alternatives that would eliminate the current standard and allow SBA to review industries currently considered to be small agricultural businesses. Following that review, SBA could then propose new size standards that are through the normal regulatory process, which would allow agriculture operators to comment and provide recommendations for a new standard. In addition, this would allow SBA to routinely review and update the standard and keep pace with variations in agriculture communities, such as change in commodity prices. As a result, the correct and appropriate size standard will be in place, better allowing producers to have access to SBA programs and to ensure that agricultural producers' needs are better reflected in a variety of regulatory initiatives. In addition, we suggest that it would be very helpful if there was a stronger harmonization of standards used by SBA and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Again, thank you, Chairman Tipton, Ranking Member Murphy, for this hearing, and allowing me to share United's position with you. We look forward to working with you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. We'll now begin the questioning, and I'd like to begin with Mr. Luchtmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to all the panelists today. It's good to see somebody from Missouri as well. Mr. Shareka, kind of curious. I think at one time SBA had the authority and the flexibility to do this themselves. Did they not? Why was it taken away? But let's have a little history here.
Sure. I can't speak to the intent back in the 80s when this was taken away. As was mentioned today, at the time, I understand the size standard was $100,000 annual receipts, and it was felt that that was below what was appropriate. But I can't speak to the congressional intent as to why that authority was taken away from the SBA.
Okay,
but since that time, we have not had the authority to establish that size standard.
Well, I was curious if there was a problem that caused the flexibility to be taken away, and Congress, they always like to take more power to themselves, or they like to do things, not necessarily well, but they like to do more things. But sure. I'm just kind of curious about it. But I know in your testimony, you talked about the different things that you look for, the characteristics, and I didn't see in there the number of employees. One of the things that we do with SBA, a lot of the other definitions are by the number of employees. Sure. Why was that not included?
Well, there actually is. There's different classifications for size standards. Some size standards are based on revenues. Others, like manufacturing, are based on number of employees. So there are different methodologies. What I would say is that, as was mentioned earlier, the rulemaking process is such that we follow the Administrative Procedures Act. So we would do an analysis, but then we'd have the opportunity not only to share it with our sister agencies to get their feedback, but it would actually go to the community, and that's where we could really gather the feedback from industry. And oftentimes it's that industry feedback and data from the industry that helps us really establish a size standard that represents industry.
And agriculture is a unique industry in that the fluctuation within it because of the markets, because of the weather. I always tell people, if you think going to Las Vegas is a real gamble, you need to be a farmer for a while. And this is like rolling the dice every day when you walk out your front door. Sure. But it's amazing, the farming. I always tell people, it's one of the few occupations where you really don't have a control over your inputs, you don't have any control over the weather, you don't have any control over the outputs, and yet you want to be a farmer. Congratulations, guys. It's amazing. One other comment I want to make with Mr. Square before we move on. One of the things I didn't see in here, although you say federal market conditions in each industry, one of the, I think Mr. Kieseman mentioned something about market fluctuations, the yearly fluctuations. I mean, that's not listed here, or is that something that's also in your federal market conditions? Is that where you take care of the fluctuations in the market? We
try to look at 3-year averages to address the fluctuations.
Okay, so the easy question, where do you think it needs to be? Or what do you?
I think we'd have to do the analysis. We haven't done it for decades. I think we really would have to do the analysis and really go through the process, as I said, to work with USDA, other agencies in establishing the size standards, but it's very important to get
Would you do it on an annual basis then, or would you do it every 5 years because of the uniqueness of agriculture, or what do you want to do?
Based on the Small Business Jobs Act, where we were required, we actually hadn't looked at size standards comprehensively for decades, but the Small Business Jobs Act of 2010, which we were thankful to receive as an agency, required us to look at a third of the size standards every 18 months, and we're on schedule to review all those size standards, and we go back every 5 years, whether it's adjusted for inflation.
Very good. Mr. Olson and Mr. Kieseman, what size do you think would be appropriate? I'm sure your associations have got some thoughts on it.
Well, Congressman, our farm bumps this limit. I love to do business with small family farms or small family businesses. Our meat sticks are made by a farm family business. Our beef is processed, USDA inspected, that we sell in our winery by a small family, and I like to do that. I know a lot of small farms that are way over the limit, very, very easily. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4 million. It depends on whether I'm buying his corn at $8.60 or I'm buying it at $3, or it makes a difference whether he's buying my beef at $1 a pound or $2.50 a pound on hanging weight. So,
you know, farming is a very capital-intensive business. I mean, your restaurant business and your winery are going to be completely different business models than what agriculture is. You know, it's
well, they are, and it's just a way, as you can see from my testimony, we want to bring sons back into the operation. My great-granddad was there. My grandfather was there. My father, that's all he knew was farm. That's all I know. I've got one son that farms with me full-time that followed me around when he was a little kid, you know. And so that's what our roots are in. We've had to change, and small business needs to change because of the limits, you know, and our Congress needs to change it. But yes, it's agriculture's a different breed of cat.
Well, I appreciate your testimony today, and I know that by rule here, we're supposed to do this every 5 years on all the other entities, and yet we haven't done this since 2000. So obviously, it's time for a change, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Luchtmeyer, and now yield to Mr. Murphy for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all again. It seems that there's a sort of fine line here, and over the past several years and decades, we've seen a continual consolidation of smaller farms into the larger farms. And by modernizing these standards and size-setting standards, how do we protect the integrity of the small businesses and prevent the corporations and the large businesses from seizing all these opportunities? How do we make that distinction? And this is for the whole panel. You can go ahead, Mr. Schrock, if you want to start.
Sure. I think obviously the question becomes, as we set size standards for other industries, because as has been mentioned today, there are certain benefits that flow to the small businesses that we set standards for. So making sure that the benefits flow to the intended recipients. And one thing that you mentioned, potentially affiliation, right? When you see affiliation amongst businesses, that has to be considered. What we consider as an individual small entity is an independently owned entity. So that takes a lot of that sort of affiliation concern away. But you're absolutely right. As we establish size standards, there are benefits that flow to those small businesses, and we need to make sure that the benefits flow to the intended recipients.
Thank you. Mr. Osman?
Great question. I kind of agree with what he said. You know, individually owned, our farm is turned into an LLC, but that's just for liability reasons. I mean, we've talked about these numbers and how great they are, and that doesn't mean we're an evil corporation, but we just realize that, you know, we don't want to jeopardize all our family's assets. So, I mean, like you said, there's a continuing consolidation. So there are great big farmers out there, you know, but I'm not sure exactly how to set that standard, but and most of them are smaller. Oh, and family owned.
As I commented a minute ago, there is a lot of large farmers. A good friend of mine farms right across the road from me, and they've got 9,000 acres of corn and probably 12,000 acres of beans. And he is a small farm family, is he and his 2 sons. And so that's what we have done to bring sons in is we have 3 different LLCs for each of the sons. So each of them share in that, but each one of them is sole proprietor of those LLCs. And you know, it's a position now where that needs to be changed. Just thinking here a minute ago, 2 of my sons were still in diapers when this was changed. So times do need to change, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with everybody on the panel here in terms of independently owned, looking at a combination of things of size and number of employees, but also kind of what the makeup of that small business looks like in terms of its needs and kind of what potentially, you know, they're asking for, quite frankly, through SBA 2. I think that's an important thing as well to consider.
And Mr. Gunther, it sounds like what I'm hearing today and what I've read that most people are in agreement the size standard does needs to increase. Do you believe that's true? And if so, to what level? And do you have a range that should be?
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer. I think I think something we would certainly have to reach out to our members and our industry, because it is an interesting dynamic that you place when you look at a corn farm operation, a beef cattle operation, or a produce operation. I mean, those are totally different agriculture business models, and a lot of them are very family-owned, multiple generations. So I think you've got to, that would be a tough task for SBA to kind of look at agriculture and kind of look at those different diversity of within these companies and how they're developed in these small businesses. So kind of giving you a range, certainly the 750,000 is out of date. Certainly it needs to be adjusted to reflect more of the the last 15-plus years or 14-plus years since it's been done, and look at the characteristics of what a small business farm or agriculture operation really looks like. We'd certainly want to talk to our members about that and kind of get a sense of that as well. But certainly that 750 is a very low threshold. I can tell you from my parents, to kind of add on to what you guys have said about, it's my parents. They have one person working for them, and my son works for them a little bit, and they would not meet that threshold. I mean, they'd be over that threshold. It's just them, and it's been that way for many years.
And Mr. Gunther, as you know, SBA has many programs that could help many farmers grow their businesses. What percentage do you think, or how many folks that you work with know about the opportunities available through SBA?
I think a fair amount do. They probably lean more towards the programs at USDA, and looking at those types of programs through, development of farm bills and other programs. But certainly I do think when you go up the distribution chain, even from the agriculture to the wholesale distributors, the processors, folks that are in that part of the produce industry, they are more attuned to looking at SBA as a partner in developing, startups or new acquisitions and things like that.
Do you think you have many members that would qualify but simply don't know about it?
I think based on the current threshold, at least at the agriculture operations, at 750,000, it would be very difficult. When you go up into the wholesale distributor, where I think that it's 500 employees or less, you would have a lot more in that world who are creating food hubs, for instance, in the wholesale distributor and in the marketplace in the wholesale markets around the country. They potentially would have a lot easier time to meet that employee threshold, because there's very few that are over 500,000 I'm aware of in that world of the produce industry.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gunther. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Mr. Shiraka, just for clarity, really probably more for the record than anything, in the view of the SBA, does the current statutory size standard accurately reflect the current economic realities of the agricultural industry, and how are these measured by the SBA?
Since we really have not set this size standard when the statute was established in the 80s, I think it would require an analysis really to determine if 750 is appropriate. We really just haven't analyzed the industry, and I couldn't really speak to what the appropriate number would be. And what's been mentioned here today a number of times I think is important is we've, by statute, clumped a lot of different things together. And we really need to look at the industries under that overall umbrella and determine what the appropriate size standards are for each.
Appreciate that. If the authority for setting the size standards in these industries is going to be returned to the SBA, with agricultural enterprise size standards, would those automatically default or at least to that number, or would the SBA look at even lower numbers potentially?
That's a great question. Thank you. I think, again, I think it's the analysis that's going to produce the results, and that's why I think it's really important to have the public comment period and to get input from industry. Certainly, the analysis may show certain industries going up, certain going down, but again, it's dependent through the Administrative Procedures Act for us to not only engage our sister agencies like USDA and others, but to get input from industry and make sure that it's accurate, or that our size standards are accurate, and then on a 5-year basis reviewed and adjusted appropriately.
Would each of the 46 subcategories, I believe it is. Would they get their own size standards?
I believe
And
so.
something
I'd have to
like
double check
would-
that, but I believe so.
When we're talking about gathering the information, listening to Mr. Osterman and Mr. Kiesman, it's going to take a little while to be able to do that. Do you have a vague idea of how long it would take you to actually get to
That's
this
a
information?
great question. Obviously, I think based on the Small Business Jobs Act of 2010, we've been on schedule at looking at 1/3 of the size standards every 18 months. So we would have to, if authority was given to us, we'd have to see to work that into our schedule. It's obviously something that we have a methodology to do. We have staff to do. When we look at our resources and map out what we're doing in 15 and 16, obviously this isn't one of the ones that has been on our radar screen, but we'd have to work it into our schedule accordingly.
Well, the good news I'm hearing, and that is you wouldn't require any further appropriations.
Well, I can't speak to our appropriations. I would leave that up to our administrator, but thanks.
And I guess maybe for our producers that are here, it's fascinating. I grew up in rural Colorado. Our family did a little bit of ranching, a little bit of farming, going out, and agricultural practices have changed a lot. Mr. Osterman, you were talking about developing new seeds, probably worked with CSU. And could you maybe talk to us a little bit about, Mr. Kiesman, you've got a family farm going back to the 1800s, how things have changed maybe since your grandparents had the family farm, family ranch?
Yeah, thanks. Great question, Congressman. I think, part of what I talked about in the testimony is just technology today. I mean, everything, we've implemented a lot of precision technologies on our farm. When we harvest a field, we map the yields, and we break it down into a data zone, and we treat each zone differently. We apply fertilizer different to that zone than to a different zone. And that allows us to put the inputs where we need them. We used to blanket apply a field, whether it could be wasteful in a spot or it might not be enough in another one. And just those advancements in technology and, bigger equipment, being able to do things more efficiently and effectively. I just believe we're better managers and stewards of our natural resources now. And not that they weren't then, but we just have a lot of more technologies available now to do that.
Mr. Kiesman?
We are fifth and sixth generations work on our farm now, and we can see that use of genetics, same as in seed corn. We use it in the Red Angus breed today. We have bulls that are negative birth weight, which make calving ease great. They'll go from 76 pounds, a new herd bull, to 705, 725 in weaning weight. That's in 205 days, and then they'll go on at 365 days and weigh 1,300 pounds. So you can see in my testimony where only 7% of the world's supply of cattle are in the United States, but we're raising 20%. So they're going faster on less feed. They're more efficient. So that's where we keep working on through the universities, through the National Cattlemen's Beef Association and Missouri Cattlemen's Association. It's a good life, but you've got to keep doing more to continue in the ag. It's not much difference in Northwest Missouri as it is in Northwest Colorado.
Mr. Gunther, do you have any comments on that?
I mean, I would agree with, technology, diversification is fascinating when you look at Mr. Kiesman and the diversification, his family's operations and others, I look at it in our world, in the produce world, and the different varieties that are available now that were never available, several generations ago, and the continuing need to keep updated with new varieties and new scientific developments that help maintain profitability in our industries. With the challenges, as you know, on food safety and other issues in our world, it's important to make sure that you're up to speed on those types of new technologies and opportunities available to you.
Well, and that's something, just kind of a personal thanks, I think, to our agricultural producers, across the board. It's always been my opinion that they're the best environmentalists, actually, that we have. Mr. Osterman, when you're talking about going out and broad-based fertilizing and now spot fertilizing, the analysis, this has become literally a high-tech world, from the planning end of it to the analysis of the soils to water consumption and product growth and development. I think that is absolutely remarkable in terms of the yield that we're getting out of our cattle industry and what we're able to do, and that's incredibly admirable.
If I could say, you know, we're good stewards of the land, or we can't pass it on generations and raise the yields that this man is raising, and our beef is fast. You know, we take care of our product and our commodities and our animals, and if we didn't take care of them, you know, there are organizations, HSUS, PETA, that's looking down at us, you know, and they don't want, you know, we're not doing things right. But we are. We're taking care of we're stewards of the land, and you know, we have to fight Mother Nature, as Congressman Lukemeyer commented a while ago. We have to fight Mother Nature. You know, we have to fight the government, and you know, commodity prices, everything else. But then we've got all these way to the far out here organizations that's really cracking down on us, you know, and sometimes do not know the true story.
Well, and I think there's at least general appreciation from a lot of the folks I visit with. You know, American farmer, American rancher feeds this country in a good part of the world, and that doesn't come without a lot of risk that you can't control when we're talking about the weather, to some of the unintended consequences of some government regulations. And talking about that, in your view, do government agencies, in your estimation, do they accurately measure and consider some of the potential impacts of proposed rules, regulations on our agricultural producers?
Well, yes and no. I think, you know, and some regulation I think is really good. On others, I don't know. And we were talking coming over here today, the regulations on the wine or the liquor industry, you know, we've had to jump through more hurdles, and some of it's just bureaucracy and red tape, and it's the same way in the meat business, you know, and again, some of this is good and some of it's bad, and that's where we get back to the regulations. You know, sometimes it hurts us, sometimes it helps, and just like some of the that they're calling right now large farms, you know, we're small family farms. It's up there in that over the 750,000 gross.
Do you have anything, Mr. Osman?
Thanks, Congressman. I think some regulations, you know, are a great thing and help curb some people and abuses in other places. But I think I sometimes see that some government regulations and agencies may overstep or overreach a lot of times in things that, you know, may or may not need regulated, in my opinion. So, I mean, I've seen some of them come down to the farm level and make sure what they're doing is good, and that's good. I encourage any of them to do that. I think that's a great way, but thank you.
Yes, sir.
If I could, the regulations on the water is going to be terrible on all of us. It's, you know, we're kind of from the high country of Missouri, northwest Missouri, I guess, and our farms, luckily, there's not much water drains on us, but it does run off. And what EPA is trying to do on all these water rights is going to really hurt us with their regulations.
Do you find it a little disturbing? I find it infuriating when we have the EPA. I consider this the greatest water grab in American history that's coming out of the EPA now in terms of regulatory authority. We have a rancher, Wyoming, potentially facing a $74,000 fine because he put in a stock pond. Just forget that he got all of the permits and abided by the law of the state of Wyoming. And now they want to be able to step in and garnish wages, come in to your farm, to your wine business, to your cattle industry, to be able to garnish wages on a fine. And we've seen a 160% increase in terms of fines coming out of the EPA right now. That's got to be of incredible concern to you, because without water, be it in Missouri, be it in Florida, certainly in Colorado, that is the lifeblood.
Well, it is, and I think they're picking on the people that's really doing the good job and trying to protect. Because if you run cattle in a lot of these streams or ponds, you know what happens. The life expectancy of them is not very long, and we've got several ponds that have been built by NRCS on a cost share program, and they you know, we fence them, keep them out, and we've been doing this for a long time. So but they still could come down on us on about anything, and it's very disturbing.
Well, we might well have to have you come back. I'd love to be able to have a hearing and to be able to have the EPA administrator come in and try and justify the savaging of the American agricultural community through some of their rules and regulations that are going on. because we have very common ground. We all like clean air, we all like clean water, but we do take umbrage of overreach that's going on. And I think what I'm hearing from you and certainly from the administrator as well, that dialogue is important. We need some rules, we need some regulations, but we also need to be able to insert some common sense into the process, make sure that that dialogue is continuing, and if something isn't working, let's stop doing it. If we can't fix it, let's just take it off the books. If we can fix it, let's make those adjustments. So I would like to thank you all for taking the time to be able to be here. I know that this is certainly a big effort, and thank you all for your busy schedules, making time to be able to come in and testify here. You've provided us all with, I believe, some important insights into how federal policy and decisions in Washington will impact our small businesses and the economies, and most importantly, your families and ability to be able to provide for them. I'd like to ask for unanimous consent that members and the public have 5 legislative days to be able to insert statements and supporting materials for the hearing record. With no objections, so ordered, and this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you again.